Welcome to a somewhat new series. I've done interviews in the past before, but I've never have done it with an app developer directly. And so, in what I hope becomes the start of a new series here on ApeTech, we have Jens.
Schumacher, yeah.
Thank you very much, Jens, for coming on. I know that the last time that you came on the Jira Life, very, very exciting time. This was like 6 months ago now. It's
Yeah,
been a
time
while.
flies.
Yeah, and so we are going to be talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly of making an app for the Atlassian marketplace. I'm really interested. I'm a software developer background myself, and very, very excited to get a chance to talk with you, a co-founder of your own company, of your own app here, and kind of just dig a little bit deeper into what does it take to build an app, and kind of walk us through your history, your lessons learned, any regrets, things that you would do different. And so we're going to jump into it and get into it all. So tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, my name is Jens, which Alex pronounced expertly. Very well done. And I actually worked for Atlassian for 15 years before I left the mothership and joined another startup. Did that for a couple of years and then eventually was drawn back into the ecosystem. We had an idea, me and my co-founder, and basically started a company called Released, where we help teams improve their product communication internally and with their customers.
So why don't we start there? Let's start with co-founders, right? A couple of people that I worked with that are app developers, obviously Release being a sponsor of ApeTech, and a variety of other marketplace vendors being, sponsors and also friends of mine. Most of them have co-founders. So what was your thought process there? Like, what made you feel like you needed a co-founder? How did you go through this selection and identifying a co-founder?
Yeah, to me, I think it always was without question that I would want to start a business with someone else. I think the first thing is that although I'm a developer by background, I haven't really developed properly for like 10, 15 years. I dabble a little bit. But having someone who is actually technical, especially if you have a SaaS business, I think it helps a lot. And it helps to de-risk in the beginning. You can build a prototype, you can start getting something off the ground and validate it before you have to spend a lot of money. So just for background, I do some advisory work as well, and I advised a whole bunch of different companies, and a couple of them didn't have a technical co-founder and thought, oh, well, I'll start a business anyway. I'm going to outsource the development. And like every now and then you see that they spend like $100,000, $200,000 of their own money on getting a prototype built with an agency, and then just to see that not working out, that idea.
It's tough, right? Because the development, like having the idea is great, but the implementation is really, really key, right? And not having someone that, has that same passion, that same gets up every morning, and this is like this is what they are, right? This app, it makes it challenging, right? So I think, yeah, definitely having a technical co-founder helps. Now, but if you're technical yourself, though, like why did you feel like I needed someone more technical?
Yeah, just because it would have taken me a long time to develop. I think it's different if you raise, let's say you're not technical and you raise a lot of money, you have a great idea and a lot of people want to throw money at it. That's probably fine. But if you're looking to bootstrap it more and say, well, we're going to build this business just like a bit more slowly and maintain more equity, it's just like really hard to put like all your money in like outsourcing the work if you can't do it. And for me, it would have been much longer to get the thing off the ground if I was to do it myself. I basically have to get back into coding. But I think that complement of skill is one part, but then the other part is also the mental support. So I think there were like many like ups and downs, in particular early on as you tried to validate the idea. We actually started off with a different product, validated that, even built a very basic prototype. And then after 2 or 3 months, realized that that's not going to fly or that's going to be too hard. Just because the feedback from I can talk more about this, like just wasn't quite right. People say, oh, that's a neat idea, but nobody really like said, oh, I need to have it today. Like, can I get it today?
Right.
So, and that was like a roller coaster of emotions up and down. And if you don't have someone else to support you and drag you out of the lows every now and then, I think that's really hard. Yeah, but at the same time, I think you like read up on like the chances of like single founders versus like multiple founders and and I think oftentimes a reason why a startup fails is because of disagreement between the co-founders as well. So it's really important to find the right person. And I think that's why sometimes it's actually better if you can do it by yourself and you got the stomach for it and the skills for it, and maybe go for it. But for me, it
Yeah,
was
because
just always.
I was gonna ask you a little bit deeper on that then. So then how did you know that this was the right co-founder? I don't even know that I've met your co-founder. I think I've seen
Yeah,
him on LinkedIn, but I don't know that we've ever been in the
yeah, I
same
think
room together.
for me it was really important that I find someone that I either worked with before, or that I know someone who really knows those people. And I would have spent more time if I never met them before, spend more time with them, getting to know them before we even start something. And maybe just like, hey, let's brainstorm ideas and start working a little bit for a month or so before we actually commit to doing this. In my case, there's this Atlassian, ex-Atlassian Slack channel, alumni channel, and I pinged. I just sent a message and I say, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing a startup. Is anyone keen on exploring some ideas?" And then within, I think, like an hour or so, Adam responded. And Adam and I worked together in 2012 on Bitbucket Server, which
Okay.
essentially was like a startup within Atlassian. We built the product from the ground up, and we worked together closely for a couple of years. So we already kind of knew the like how we work together, and that really helped.
Yeah. So before we even go on, I wanted to call out two little funny things. One, I'm trying so hard to not geek out like I did last time, because the biggest comment that I got was I hogged the entire conversation because I was just like, and starstruck that I was with like employee number 13. And two, I love how the roles are now reversed. I'm over here like in my sweater because it's cold. Last time I made the comment that it was your winter, but
That's
I'm
right. Yeah.
assuming it's a little bit warmer for you today than it is for me.
Yeah, it's going to be 40 degrees again, and I think on Thursday. It's
So yeah.
should
So
have
anyways,
taken this meeting in the pool instead.
I know, right? And meanwhile, I'm over here just like I got two sweaters on and I'm freezing. Anyways, so just wanted to make that little comment because I'm trying really hard here. Let's talk about ideas then, right? So you kind of mentioned that you had an idea, you did a quick validation, right? And it's going to be like a two-part thing, right? We'll talk about the ideas, but I also want to talk about MVPs, right? How do you go through the idea phase quickly to get as much feedback and lessons as possible? But let's
Mm.
focus on ideas first, right? Like, so how did you come up with the idea for what ultimately became your app?
So I think maybe let's talk about the previous idea first, because it's you always hear the success stories, or when something worked out. You don't hear often when it doesn't work out. So I feel like
Mhm.
giving
Yeah,
the
walk us
listeners a
through
little
memory
background in
lane.
that as well. Yeah. So this I started talking to Adam with two ideas. One of them was the basically release notes, and that came out of like pain that I felt in my last startup, where I was the product manager in a small head of product in a small team, and I was responsible for the customer communication and doing the release notes. And just like doing it manually was a pain in the ass. And I looked at the different tools that are available in the market, and actually everything helped me publish release notes to different channels like email and publish it on a website. It was all great, but none of them actually helped me like figure out what work was done and then take that and convert it into the release notes. And that's like back then I actually wrote a very simple Jira like integration that just took content from a Jira ticket and published it to the website to make that the whole process more automated. And that was basically the first prototype of the app that we ended up building. But the other idea I had was around people management, and that came back from Atlassian, where I always felt like I wasn't on top of the feedback and giving feedback and helping supporting the people that reported to me. So it's like, oh, maybe we should build an app that allows us to um, basically like a feedback coach, like write notes, then take those notes, automatically convert in feedback, and then at the end of the year create a performance review based on what we've done. And we did probably 20 plus interviews, and everyone said, oh, that sounds like a nice idea. But there's at the same time, luckily I was reading a book that I highly recommend for anyone starting out, which is called The Mom Test. And if you read the mom test, it's basically the premise is that if you tell your mom, say, hey, like I'm building this iPad app, like, what do you think? And your mom would say, oh, of course, that's great. It's going to be amazing. I would love to use it every day of my life. But she's lying to you. That's the premise. And that's the point with most of the people that you interview. they all probably lie to you in some way because they're trying to be not mean or harsh. Like nobody likes to say, I don't think that's a good idea. You shouldn't do that. It's like, oh yeah, that's neat, or that's nice. So that's what you will hear a lot. And for us, I think it just came down to the challenge of replacing, like, first of all, where do we do the note taking? Do we have to integrate with all the different note taking apps or build our own? But then you have to get people to use that tool, which is hard. And then also the go-to market was difficult. You probably have to go through HR because it's like a performance management tool. Like it just was like all very hard, and nobody really jumped at it. So we decided, okay, this is probably not the right approach. And then back to the drawing board with the release notes app. For release notes, then we initially thought, oh, it's going to be like a 3 to 6 months, and we build an app, and it's all going to be. From then on, it's just money is coming flying in. Turns out it was like a little bit more complicated to build if you want to put all the bells and whistles in. But early on, we had to make a decision: should we build for the Atlassian marketplace, or should we build a standalone app? And for us, the decision came down to, first of all, there's like a dozen standalone apps out there, and they all differentiate like very little. They all kind of look the same. They're all kind of the experience for creating the release notes is all the same. So we said, okay, that's just getting into another crowded market without a clear differentiator was not a good idea. And then we looked at the Atlassian marketplace and saying, oh, what's there for release notes? So first of all, you have the kind of releases feature in Jira itself. So if you go to the releases and the versions, for each version, you can create a release. Now,
were you part of that team that decided to call them two different things? That's just the most confusing thing in the world.
Which one? The releases and the versions, you mean?
Yeah, and the versions, the fact that they're not the same name.
Well, you basically.
Or do you know the person that came up with that idea? Because I
can't recall, but like essentially, you could call it versions, but I think the idea is that it's a bit more than versions. It's like release and like everything that belongs to it.
I know, but why not one or the other? It's everybody I talk to is always so confused. In fact, I did a video where I compared versions versus releases, and it's one of my more popular videos because a lot of people it's a big.
I think I watched that actually. Yeah. Well, maybe somebody from Atlassian is watching and can take that into account.
No, somebody from Atlassian should be watching though, because they made it even worse now. Now there's another releases. They added a new releases that is strictly for your deployments, for your CI/CD, so to hook up to your pipeline. But it's literally called releases. It's on the ticket. And then there's a fixed version, but then there's the releases on the left. And I'm like, too many the same thing. Sorry, just thought I'd point it out that that's very upsetting.
Well, so like releases exist, and you can attach your release notes to a release. And I think the way it works is just that it takes the Jira tickets that are there and takes the content directly from the Jira ticket, and you can publish it to Confluence and say which fields you want to do. Like so, and it's fine. It's like a good like MVP functionality there. And then there was like a couple like other kind of apps in the marketplace, but like none of them worked the way we wanted. I think the like AI just came around as well, so that was obviously a good incentive for us to jump on that technology, and we made that kind of core of the experience. So basically, summarize there wasn't a lot of like competition in the Atlassian marketplace, but a lot of competition outside. So basically, we went into the app idea and said, like, what if we just trying to become the number one app for Jira developers, like, or Jira users, and that gives us a really good niche to go into the market to compete against the other vendors outside as well, have a clear differentiator, because the integration is just going to be more seamless because you don't have to have a separate user management. We can leverage the billing as well, which gives us a much faster time to market. We don't have to build all that functionality. That speaks for the Atlassian marketplace, but also the tight integration into like all the Jira tickets and the Jira API just makes a much more compelling integration, or a much more compelling like user experience. So that was the idea.
That's very smart. Yeah, a couple of things that come to mind. One, I totally empathize on the whole mom test thing, because I'm an only child, so anything that I do and my mom sees it, like it's gold. And so I can definitely, I know my mom's lying to me half the time, because She has to, right?
She has
And
to.
two, she has to. But the second thing that's really interesting, right? So that kind of came to mind with this whole release notes thing, right? Is you came in to a functionality, to a feature that, again, as you mentioned, right, already exists, but I feel like I've never used it. Not your app, but the built-in stuff, right?
Mhm.
Because it was too bare bones, right? It was too bare bones to add any value, to do anything
Mhm.
of any significance for a company, right? And so I've worked with like content document writers, right? The folks that do the technical documentation for like the products that you're building, right? And so Jira, like taking the tickets was cool, but they always had to augment it so much, right? Like they had to add headers and make it presentable, right? Make it a little bit nicer. So I really
Yeah.
really like when you reached out. It's been what, at least 7-8 months now.
Yeah.
How long has it
Really,
been since you guys launched?
we released the app in June.
So
So
6 months then.
yeah.
But yeah, no, it's definitely it definitely helps build a voice. How much of like Chat GPT and all that, like, was there a convergence where like it was coming out and you're like, oh, we need to jump on this, or do you guys even use Chat GPT? Like how did the AI play a role into it?
Yeah, we started actually working with like OpenAI, the APIs, when we worked on the previous product. Basically, writing up some feedback in your feedback notes and then say convert this into a message for my report and make it sound nice. So even if you say, "Oh, that presentation was shit," it's like, "Oh, that presentation could have been better." Blah blah blah. And that
Politically
worked
correct.
actually. That worked exactly. So that worked really well, and that was when still only the API was available. So you didn't have ChatGPT. Like not everybody jumped on it, and I showed the results to my wife, and she was just like blown away. It's like, well, like that's crazy. Like how does that work? And to be honest, it was a bit of a bummer that they came out with ChatGPT because, like, now all of a sudden it's not magical anymore. Imagine if you came out with the
But now it's
release notes like six
expected though,
months
right?
earlier.
But now it's
Exactly.
expected.
Like,
I think
yeah,
like an app that doesn't have AI integrated with it, it's like, well, why am I going to use your app now? Like, I want the app with AI. I think it's making a lazy generation.
yeah, but the release notes idea we had, I think that's also important before even ChatGPT. So, in fact, one of the early customers that we had or that we have, he wrote us an email and said, "Look, I really really like your app. Like the AI stuff is nice, but just the integration with Jira is like so well done and just like so much better than everything else in the market. That's why I like it. It's not even the AI thing." So that's good
Yeah.
validation as well, because if you just rely on AI being a differentiator, that's a difficult position to be in.
Yeah.
But we certainly like looked at AI in the beginning, like how do we improve or enhance that workflow that we have and just make that a really seamless experience and remove as much friction from the process of creating those product updates.
Now, I don't want to ask anything confidential, right? But like anything on your roadmaps with respect to like release notes to me is one piece of the puzzle, right? And it's usually the tail end of the puzzle, right? It's like it's one of the
Yeah.
last things that we're doing. But I often feel that these release notes are usually, associated or complement like the roadmap of a
Mm.
or the functions, right? The features that somebody wants to work on, right? Because you kind of almost your release notes should almost like validate, like, hey, we had this idea, this is the goal that we had. Here's the end result. Like any thoughts that you guys have had to maybe go branching beyond just release notes, but help like from a program perspective get better or deliver, or maybe even with test cases and then your release notes show here's the test case that validated or whatever. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think like we're always looking to expand the scope, and for us, I think it's important to understand like the mission of the company is to help teams improve their product communication internally and externally. So that's really what we're trying to do. And product communication is obviously much more than just what you have at the tail end, but also what you're planning and feedback. So those are two aspects that we want to look into more. In fact, for Code Guys, we did write like the first version of an app that makes the communication of roadmaps easier, and it's now in like a private beta that we're running. The idea is that we take a Jira product discovery board. there, which you can like obviously invite people to today, but they don't have the anonymous access. So you can't put it on your website if you want to communicate what's coming up to your customers. That's not easily done today. And that's kind of what bothered us, because we wanted to let people know what's coming up. And basically you can take your Jira product discovery roadmap from one project or multiple and put them all into one board and then publish that on your website. And then we're looking at how do we integrate that functionality with release notes. Once something is released in the last column, then hooking that up to the release notes and linking that directly and creating kind of a nice continuous experience between the two apps there. So that's kind of the next phase that we're entering right now. But there's so many features to build for the release notes still. It's it's the hard part is prioritizing or looking at growing the team.
So let's talk about that then, right? Because one of the things I want to talk about was MVP, but then obviously like this is I think one of these like analysis paralysis type of thing where it's like you get so many ideas that it becomes overwhelming. So how did you I'm assuming that when you and your co-founder, right, you guys were iterating through what do we do, what do we want to do, like what do we not want to do, but how did you determine like this is the MVP, this is what we're going to use? Like how did you weed all those ideas to just the select few that ended up being your proof of concept?
So the way I think about MVPs, and it's an interesting definition if you look at product manager arguing about what an MVP is, you will see that's like, oh, it's just like a website where you can sign up. That's a MVP as well because you get your message out of there. But for the purpose of this discussion, I limit it to actually what's the first version of the product that you want to ship
that could potentially work.
That's already valuable, right? Like minimal valuable product, or viable, I guess, in this case. So, and like I like to focus on just what is the core functionality or the core pain point that people are looking to solve. And that's basically what we got out. Just, I think like at Summit, we, or Team 23, we had a demo of it that we showed people. And then in June, we had the first release. And the MVP was really having the issues, selecting the right issues that you want to include in your release, generating the release notes for it, and then publishing it. So that's kind of the core functionality. To give you another example for like Bitbucket, which is a product I worked with Adam on, we went up against Bitbucket, against GitHub Enterprise back then, and building a completely new product within Atlassian in 2012. And the reason why we did this because a whole bunch of our customers, they asked us, hey, do you have Git hosting for behind the firewall? We really want a product for that. So the first version that we released was basically you can put a Git repository into a project and have some basic permissions around it and host it and pull for it. Like that was basically all that we did. And a whole bunch of people already liked it. Now we made a couple of decisions, and I think that's pretty important as part of the MVP. You have to think about what is your core differentiator, or like what is your core differentiator? How are you going to stand in the market and bake this into your MVP? So for Bitbucket Server, the difference back then was that we decided our market is going to be 1,000 developers and up. That's the audience we're building for, where GitHub was built for just open source tools, like open source projects, like a few developers. And the way we structured the application was you basically had projects, and in each project you could have, similar to Jira, you could have multiple repositories. So in the first version, we didn't even have any permissions on the repository itself. We only had project permissions, and then came down later. So there's some trade-offs that you make early on to kind of work towards that differentiator and make it sure that the foundation is really baked around those things. So that's the same what we did with Released as well. Part of it is the integration into Jira and how we build it into Jira as a first cut, but then also how we designed the UX experience with like an editor, and then the issues that you can like select from and pull them into the editor, and just really nailing that core experience. That was really important for us, that people, even without all the bells and whistles, say this is a great experience, or I really like that product.
Yeah. It felt a lot like Confluence, right? Like the first time I tried it, it felt like I was building a Confluence page, but dragging in my Jira issues the way I wanted it, right? And I thought that was really interesting, or really at least a nice, little hat tip to playing on the fact that people, it was going to feel similar, right, or familiar at least, right? Because again, with the other one, like, you don't really have like with the built-in stuff, you kind of just pull up your fixed version and it goes, here's what you did. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the idea was to create a product that's familiar. That's why we're using the Atlassian like UI libraries as well. Like if you sit in Jira as a plugin developer, you want to make sure that it doesn't feel like completely like a separate app. So completely different colors, completely different UI elements. You want to make sure that it feels part of the same experience. So that's something to look into. And for Confluence, we was like, oh, should we use the Atlassian editor, which would have been an option as well. But at the same time, there's some unique experiences we wanted to provide, like the dragging something in, and using that Atlassian editor just would have been too complicated. And also, we don't need all the capabilities that the Atlassian editor has. But we use the same base editor and make sure that the keyboard shortcuts are the same. So when people try to, well, actually, that's one of the things. Adding a link, Command K doesn't quite work, and that's on my list to get fixed. But like if you come from Confluence, or if you come from Jira, that the experience feels familiar. That's really important.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, that's when you know, right? Like, it's not just an app that's on top of Jira, but it's an app that complements Jira, which
That's
I think,
right.
yeah. And one of the things, like me being an end user, right? I'm typically, and you said this word over and over, right? I'm usually trying to solve some pain point, right? I got a team, they want something, they know what they want, but now comes the challenge of, like, is there an app for that in Jira, right? So what I'll typically do is like put release notes, and then there's like 4 or 5 different apps, and so I'll just try them all. But I usually give it like a minute, right? If I get in, I install it. If I have to do a configuration, fine. But within a minute or two, I need to be able to solve my pain point. Otherwise, I move on to the next one. And again, just not to just make this be like how amazing your app is, but it was one of those things where, like, that intuitiveness, right? It's so important, because I'm focused on fixing the problem, that I don't also need to learn how the app works, right? Like, I don't have to stumble with, like, where is this menu item or that menu item or whatever, right? It just kind of naturally works easily, and I can just focus on that pain point, or see even I can resolve that pain point. So I really like that.
I think that's a really good point. In fact, we spent quite a bit of time in the beginning on that experience and refined it quite a bit. So it's really important to do a whole bunch of like user tests before you even release the first version. But even if you've done that, like those are always a little bit guided. Once you have the first version, then you should talk to users as well and see like what was intuitive or what was not, without any guidance from you, and you will discover pretty quickly if there's any friction. So for example, for us, we thought it would be really neat if the created description for a ticket would be attached to a ticket as a custom field, and so you can see it on the ticket as well. And basically that was the core experience. And yeah, that works really well. It's a great experience. The problem is that you have to set up a custom field, and for a lot of people that's not super intuitive, or they need an admin to do it, or it's just not the easiest way to get started. But you needed to do it before you could even use the app. So then we decided, okay, well, like how can we make this easier? How can we remove that friction even further? So we now by default get started storing the description against the ticket, but into an issue property, which you don't have to set up. But it also it's not visible on the Jira ticket itself. But that's a trade-off that we made. And then when people want to set it up and want to show it on a Jira ticket, they can add the custom field, and then from then on, it basically gets stored into custom fields. So that's kind of compatible, like backwards compatible as well with the old tickets. But that was like a big piece of friction that we removed early on, where we went back to the drawing board and said, how do we make that experience better? And in fact, like even now I think this week we're starting to work on like a new getting started experience where we explain the product. Even though it seems like it's fairly simple, it's fairly easy to use, there's still a little bit of friction that you can explain, that you can remove. And so it's you're never done optimizing that getting started experience.
So let's peel back a little bit about that. I want to talk about soliciting feedback and requirements, right? So they kind of, I feel like they kind of go hand in hand, because as a product person, I feel like your customers help you define those requirements, right? Like what do people want? And you kind of get that through feedback, right? Like people using the app and then giving you opinions. And so I want to, peel back a little bit and maybe we can talk about how do you solicit feedback? How do you grade the feedback? How do you determine what of that feedback makes it into a requirement?
Mm. Yeah, so I think like to start with, we sorry, let me just
We have guests.
little
Don't worry,
guests.
we can cut it out.
Yeah, they're usually welcome, but not now. Okay, so in terms of priorities, we usually start with our own priorities. There's a whole list of features that we would like to build that we think are really important, and some are strategic because we know that they are going to help. For example, with a specific use case, internal customer communication, we want to get done a Slack integration. We wanted to get done Confluence integration, and then you have some other features where customers ask for like templates to standardize the release notes that they want to create.
That was one that
Or
was in my mind.
there you go,
Because I'm not
which
very
we're
creative.
working
I'm
on.
like, a template would be great because that was one of the things when I looked at your app, which was like, I'm like, okay, I have a blank canvas. But I got the same feeling I get when I'm in Confluence, which is like, great, I got a blank canvas. What am I supposed to do with this? I'm not very creative.
And in fact, we had that feedback early on from people and say, hey, like, why don't you help us getting started with a template? And the reason we didn't was that if we like a template, getting a template right is hard to begin with, and then setting one up is also a hard experience. And if the template is not quite right, and people say, that's not quite what I want, similar to your experience with the default release notes in Jira, it's like, it's not quite what I want. I want to edit it more, right? So, and then like, how do I do this? So we basically decided like, okay, let's focus on the core experience, and then we add the templates later on. But those are all feedback items that we take on board. And then if we hear like a whole bunch of people asking for the same thing, or if there's like, let's say there's like a large potential customer coming in and saying, hey, that's the thing I'm missing. Then we look at this list and it's like, okay, like, can we just prioritize this? And it's easy to do when you're small and you don't have like thousands of customers asking for things. It's basically just, hey, okay, they're asking for it. We want to do it anyway. Let's just pull it forward by like a few weeks. That doesn't really make a big difference. Once you get larger, then the prioritization obviously changes. You have to like look at what's the time to value, also like what's in terms of strategy, like what is important to us, and you just come up with different ways to prioritize. But it's usually
Do you have like a pipeline though to get like that feedback though? Because I mean, because you kind of have blinders too though, right? Like you as the developers and it's your baby, right? You have these blinders of like, this is what I perceive as quote unquote the perfect app. But then your end users are going to have like a whole different perspective, right? Because they're looking at it from I got a job to do and I need something to help me make this job easier, right? So from that perspective, right? Like, do you have like a proper process or do you do like groups of, or like, how do you get that feedback? Like, what does that look like?
I think this is where we get to the ugly of the Atlassian marketplace. So there's a whole bunch of benefits of being in an ecosystem like the Atlassian marketplace. I talked about earlier the user management. You have exposure to a whole group of people, the billing. So there's tons of benefits. One of the drawbacks is the ability that you have to get in touch with people. And I actually don't fault Atlassian. That's the right thing to do. But as an app vendor, the only email address or the only contact you have is the contact of the person installing the app or the technical contact. And for small companies, that's probably fine. It's like the CEO or like someone who probably uses the product. But for anything like mid-sized or large, you usually have an administrator that is not going to be the person that uses the app. So telling them, like emailing them and saying, hey, like, why don't you get started with this? And it's like, I don't care. Like, I'm not the user.
I've had a similar thing where it's even worse when you have multiple admins, right? Where I got 20 Jiras and I have one of my admins, not even in my department, install something. And then I'm getting an email. I'm like, I didn't even
Yeah.
install it. I don't even know what you're talking about.
There you go. So as you can tell, like that effectiveness of sending onboarding emails is not very good. So we're gonna try, and this is why we changed the onboarding as well, like putting something in app to allow people to sign up to a newsletter and get more information there. That's one part. But it also makes it hard to just get feedback, because a lot of people, when they don't have a good experience, they don't reach out to you. And we have to rely at the moment on like proactively reaching out and seeing if something comes back, or for people just to come back to us with feature requests. And those are usually the more passionate users. But yeah, there's not a fantastic way that I've seen to solve that problem. And again, like that's at smaller scale. At larger scale, you probably have too much feedback coming in, and then you set up a process to consolidate that as well. And that's like one area that we want to look at as well. Like, how do we make it's part of the product communication. How do we make the intake of the feedback easier, but also communication out to customers once you have implemented something? That's an area that we're quite interested in as well.
Okay, so why don't we go a couple things within the Atlassian ecosystem, right? Like, I think before we get into the why building for Atlassian, or why building in the Atlassian marketplace, I want to talk about like kind of complementing the feedback, right? But on a similar note of driving adoption, right? Like, what kind of tools, what kind of techniques does Atlassian give you, or do you leverage to help market your app, to help, yell it from the top of the mountaintops to tell people we exist, use us?
Yeah, I think if
beyond
you,
beyond sponsoring an awesome channel like mine here.
I think that's actually one of the better options to let people know about your app. Within the Atlassian ecosystem, there's like a few events. Like, first of all, in the marketplace itself, when you release a new app, you're going to be featured in the new apps for like a few weeks before you drop off. And that drop off gets pretty quick now. So if you built an app probably like 5 to 10 years ago, that would have been a bit easier. The marketplace was a bit less crowded. Now you have a ton of new apps all the
I
time,
heard
a
it's
lot
like
of small
6,000 or
ones.
something like that. No,
It's
six.
thousands of apps. So it makes it quite hard to stick out as a new vendor and to get traction. And as soon as you drop off the kind of like what's new or the new apps listing, you're basically on your own. And so there's then search engine optimization within the marketplace, making sure that you have the right keywords in your listing, that you pop up for relevant searches. Ideally, you want to get into like the right categories and rank there. But again, for the categories, because you have few installs and you have few reviews, it's really hard to get a ranking very high up. And for better or worse, like currently, if you look at the staff pick apps, they're usually just the top apps that are in the marketplace and just on repeat. And I think Atlassian is looking to change this and introduce some other categories as well, with like up and coming apps, and give it a bit more diversity. But it's pretty hard to just stand out in the Atlassian marketplace. So then you have to look at like other options. So they have the like Apptoberfest was a event that I run in the community recently, where you can demo your app and let people know. And that's an okay channel. We haven't seen a ton of installs or a huge spike, even though we like did I think win that contest for our category. So that has been fun, but I don't think it has moved the needle a lot. And then you basically on your own, like looking at marketing yourself, like going to Atlassian events. We sponsored the Atlassian Velocity event in Sydney, the high velocity one. Unleashed is happening as we speak, I think, in Europe, but it's just a little far from Australia for us to travel at this time of the year. The family wasn't happy about that. And then there's like Team 2024 next year, which we're definitely looking to attend again as well.
Yeah, I'm hoping to run into you then. I am gonna be there the whole week.
Yeah, I gotta start booking flights soon. Last time we left it too late and spent way too much on flights.
Yeah, I remember what would have been in April, right? You were just still beta, if even in beta, right? Like,
Yeah.
I remember you showing me a quick demo there.
Yeah, we didn't have any beta customers. We just started, I think, like a couple of weeks later, we started onboarding the first customers. It was super early.
Nice. So
So
you're kind of on your own then, right? That's interesting that, like, because Apple has their marketplace, right? That's pretty vibrant and millions of apps,
yeah.
and so you would think that, like, I feel like Atlassian has a love-hate relationship with the marketplace vendors because I think one of the things that makes the Atlassian ecosystem so popular is like the gift and the curse, right? It's a gift because you have flexibility to add on to make it better, to go beyond what Jira can or can't do.
Mm.
But then you also come with the price of, well, shoot, well, now you can make it better, which means you cost more money, and which means that almost every bright idea that I have, I need to go install an app for it because Jira's not going to be able to do it for me. So
Mm.
I think it's an interesting environment there.
Yeah, like it really depends on, like, obviously not going to install 50 apps. Like usually there's a certain number of use cases that you want to cover, and I think as an app vendor, the best thing that you can do is build an app that's applicable to, let's say, like 30 to 50% of the Jira customer base. It's like, oh, would this app be really interesting to like 50% of the customer base or 30%?
Right.
If you cater for 100%, then really Atlassian should be doing it themselves. And then know that as well. That's when I worked at Atlassian, we always looked at, okay, what do we want to get into and what should we let the ecosystem take care of? Because you can't bloat your app with all the features that everybody wants. And this is where the ecosystem is really good, because you can provide extension points for apps to cater or solve those use cases, but you don't have to build them into the core app.
Did
And
you?
at the same time, Atlassian can keep the app a bit more of the core app more affordable. I think that's definitely part of the strategy to keep Jira affordable and then let people
I don't
add
know,
add-ons.
man. I'm going to be publishing a video next year that says this Jira too expensive now because it just keeps
Have you
going
looked
up and
at
up and up.
like compared to the food and other prices? Has it gone up that much really? So inflation has been definitely hard,
It's
right?
been
So
hurting. Yeah.
yeah, it's
No,
been
it's
hurting.
crazy. It's a crazy market and a crazy environment we live in here. But yeah, definitely an interesting thing. So I think it's an area that I'd like to more focus on as well, right? Because a lot of the comments that I get on my videos are like, "Hey, you got Jira covered. Awesome. Like it works. We know how to use Jira now, but we have no idea which app we want or how to use
Mm.
it or why we should use one over the other." And I'm like, well, that puts me in a tough spot though, right? Because I can't, and I'm in this kind of situation right now, right? Like I'll have a sponsor who does like a category. Like,
Mm.
well, I'll use a real example, right? I have a backup customer or sponsor, but then I got another one that also does
Mm.
backups. And so now like I'm balancing this like I'm Switzerland type of situation where I'm like, hey
Yeah.
man, I just provide the content, but it makes it hard, right? Because I can't say like, oh, this app is better than this other app. And so it's a challenging thing, but like there is no easy way, even from like a content creator perspective, to highlight apps either without putting the light down on some other ones. So I've been trying to
Mm.
figure out, I've been trying to kind of spend some time figuring out like how do I do that, but how do I also monetize, right? Because this is a business after all,
Yeah.
and kind of keep that. But then I like your perspectives, right? Like how do you do it also in a way that you're not a sleazy salesman, right? Or coming. So there's a lot of authenticity and stuff like that. So any thoughts with that?
Yeah, and I think I sent you a message there. There's like a few creators that do that really well, and where they don't let the kind of like sponsorship get in the
Yeah,
way
like
there.
MKBHD was the example you gave me, which is
Yeah,
the example I
yeah,
use. I'm like,
exactly.
I should be able to review another release app and be, just be fair.
Yeah, and it's a fine balance to find, obviously, but just focusing objectively on the capabilities without saying like, oh, is this like worth or better? Just taking people through the app and saying, hey, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do, and then let people make up their mind if that's a good use case for them or not. That seems like a good middle ground.
Yeah, but so
And
the
you
the
really,
part
yeah, good.
so the part where I'm having a trouble though is like, let's just say I put release notes, right? I'm like, hey, you got to get release notes. It's awesome, but let's look at the top 5 release notes apps in the marketplace, right? So I can look at
Mm.
just 5 of them, but like obviously you and I have a partnership, but now what happens with the other 4 folks, right? Like, do I go and say, hey, here's a
I
video?
think, and maybe that's like something that you have to be clear about with your partners as well. It's like, hey, if there's something better in another app, I have to call it out, right? Like so I wouldn't have a problem with that, for example. Ultimately, like the app has to stand on its own. And if you compare like the top 5, like what's the good, what is the bad, you just gotta be honest about it. I think that's pretty important for the creator, and being honest and upfront about this with your sponsors. That say, hey, like I can't let the sponsorship bias my reviews or when I compare or like talk about it. I think that's really important too. Yeah.
Well, because and I only asked, right, because I honestly, just from a personal level, I don't even think I've ever told you this, right? But like you've given me the most amount of feedback from anybody else other than Chris Cook. Like Chris Cook will always drop me some unsolicited feedback and goes, "Hey, buddy, don't do that," or "Do more of this." But other than him, like I think you're the only other person that I feel has like a vested interest in, and not just like the channel, but like just seeing my overall success as well, right? Like I value a lot of your feedback there, and I'll take it back with the wife, and I'm like, I made Jens not happy again, and so we're pivoting and we're trying to figure out how to make it better. So, but that's the only way you can get better, I think. Sometimes, right? It's just having that feedback and looking at it as constructive criticism, right? Not a, oh, don't do it that way and your channel sucks or whatever, right? Like it's I always know it comes from a good place.
Yeah, and again, like if you look at my case, like early videos when I think his first video was the review of an MP3 player when he was like 13 or something. And just to see how far he has come, I think it's just a great example of how continuous practice and continuous improvement and what you're doing, like looking at what is working, what is not working, how do we better cater for the audience, right? But still growing a business. I think that's exactly the right questions to ask. And
yes, and it's just tricky because nobody else, like we're I don't know if you've heard, but Atlassian has an official Atlassian's creator program, which I'm in, and I'm looking, right, we have a lot of people in this community. There's like 60 of us, but nobody's doing it at the scale that I'm at, right? Like I'm doing it at a different, just because everybody's like it's a side gig. It's like a little part-time thing that they do on the side, and if they get a couple $100, like awesome, like McDonald's food, right? But I'm like, I'm legitimately like, I'm trying to, like, for next year, just to kind of give you a teaser of what I'm working on, right? Is we're focusing more on user generated content. So where, for example, like you probably don't have time to create all the content for training and for just utilization and promotions and shorts and TikToks and everything that's focused on your app. I'm trying to get into the business where I help app vendors do their content for them because people like, or they resonate with the style that I have, right? And so kind of leveraging that style, that technique for them to be able to outsource that aspect of their business so they at least have content. Because I feel, I'm a big firm believer, right? Like even with you as a small startup, if you're in people's faces, right, and people are looking things up, and you got Instagram stories and reels and TikToks and everything, I'm like, hey, release notes, we exist, we're shouting it out at the top of the mountains. It's only a matter of time before people are like, I need a release note app. Oh, right, I heard about one. Let me go and install that one, right? So I think it's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, and I think it's also good content for people to have. So advertising on Google, we tried that out. Like you asked about like different channels. So Google was something we tried. LinkedIn was something we tried. And it's good to get some awareness. In particular, LinkedIn, I think, is fairly good for awareness, but it's also just like a point in time. So you still have to like throw more money into the fire in order to keep that going, where sponsoring like your channel, like that content is like evergreen, at least for like a year or two. So it's
Right, yeah.
not a big spike, but
especially the technique that you took, right, which was like, hey, this is not a specific app video, right, but it's more like when you're watching a soccer game, right, you're seeing the sponsors go across the billboards there, right, along the court, or the pitch is what I guess they call it in the UK. Right? But it's kind of like that, right, because your sponsorship is going to in perpetuity be in those videos forever, right? And once those algorithms catch them, right, like people are going to be this video sponsored by Released, right? And so I think that was a good play. I don't know what I'm going to do next year. I'm still trying to figure it out, but it's definitely something that I'm top of my mind trying to figure out.
Yeah, happy to brainstorm. I'm like curious to see where you're gonna take this.
We'll definitely have to connect. But I know we only got a couple minutes here left, so why don't we skip over, right? And let's just maybe we can end it up by like, why did you build for Atlassian, and maybe go a little bit deeper into some of the items that we haven't covered yet.
Yeah, I think like I talked a lot about the reasons why, like the user management and the billing and kind of differentiation in the market. What have we not covered yet?
Well, maybe let's put it this way. Is there like a feature or functionality that you're itching to get out? Like what are you most excited about right now with your app?
Well, we've been working on, and you mentioned it earlier that you wanted templates. And we've been working on templates for 4 weeks now. It's a much bigger feature than we expected it would be. But it's going to be worthwhile because it opens up the door to a whole bunch of other capabilities as well. So essentially what you wanted to do before you can create a template for, like, let's say release notes and changelog. The different one is more technical, maybe has bugs, and you specify different smart sections. So this is a section where I just want to get the epics and have a long description. You can customize the prompt for it. And then the bug, you want a list of bugs listed there. And once you apply the template, instead of you having to drag all the issues into the editor, it basically just pre-populates them all and creates the content automatically. So just like that first step gets much more automated for you and basically allows you to create a consistent kind of format for internal or external communication.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things that my favorite type of release notes that I see in just vendors and just products in general in the wild is like I'm a huge fan of that like non-audio like GIF that just kind of for like 2 seconds kind of just shows you click here and then you're
Yeah.
like scrolling down, you read some paragraph and you're like, this is what it does. Because I think like on my Tesla, I think Tesla was probably one of the inspiration was that you sent me earlier on, no? That you're like our release notes are kind of like Tesla's notes where it's easy, it's intuitive, right? And that's one of the favorite things that I like, where it's like I can look at my Tesla release notes and go, I just gotta click this button here and it'll do whatever I tell it to do.
Yeah, and Tesla I think they're doing a great job because it's right there in the app. Like, it's not like you don't get it sent via email where you probably ignore it, but it's like in the Tesla UI, it's like
So is
everything
that
you want,
something
you can try it out as well. Yeah.
is that something that's available for you as a feature where like you said that you can take the release notes from Jira and deploy it to the website, but do you have like a native integration where they can bring it into their app so that they can just not need an FAQ or a release note section?
Yeah, so you can either take the same content that you put onto the website and just put it into like a full page in-app experience, or we have a widget as well, similar to Intercom, where you click on what's new in released, and then there's like a pop-up that comes up and shows you everything that's new, and you get like a little red dot when there's a new update available, for example.
I wonder with you guys AI, right? It just kind of came to my mind. It's like, okay, so I don't know how I would do this, right? I'm trying to find the right words, right? But like, if a team's working on a bug and they fix the bug, it obviously solved the problem. So helping a company have like an FAQ that also gets built on top of like the release notes, right? Because so the reason we have the release notes is like, okay, because I feel like FAQs and release notes are two sides of the same coin, right? Your release notes are like, here's all the cool stuff you can do. Nobody's gonna read it because they're gonna read it when they ran into a problem. And this is where the frequently asked questions come in, right? But being able to like automatically, because the answers are in the ticket somewhere, right? Like, here's the questions that are popping up because maybe you have a lot of bugs like themed around the same type of question, and then like here's the fixes for it.
I think, but the problem is by that time it's already too late because now it's not going to be a frequently asked question anymore because you just resolved it.
You just fixed it. No, but people still
Yeah,
have the
exactly.
same. It doesn't have to be like a fix though. But like, there's always like fix like there's like that last one, right? With the whole booking for Team 24 is like frequently asked questions. Where's the hotel? Right?
Yeah.
Just
So yeah, like one thing we're looking at as well is there's the pop-up in app, and that's great. But are there other kind of elements that we can provide, whether just pointing to a particular feature, whether it's a new button that exists, and then allowing you to attach the release notes to that context, or a banner, for example. So there's a few things that we can do to even communicate better in app those updates. There's certainly some exciting things that we're looking at.
Well, I
Yeah.
want to be mindful of your time, so thank you very much for coming on. And maybe we got to do a part 2, or maybe in another. We can just do these revolving every 6 months.
Yes,
Or we're
love to.
evolving.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so
Looking
much.
forward to.
Appreciate
And
it.
next time we can I'm looking forward to hear what format you came up with. Like maybe we can test that format with released.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's important to consistently be iterating, right, and trying new things and making mistakes and seeing what lands, what doesn't land. Because, like, at least with my YouTube videos, right, I've kind of gotten into this cycle of like, I know what works, but I got a laundry list of 20 new things, new ideas that I want to do. But because my videos are sponsored, I'm like, I'm kind of like locked now. So for next year, I'm like, do I really want sponsors, or do I just want the freedom to make whatever video I want to make? So we'll see.
Yeah.
Maybe I gotta find a cool sponsor that wants to do it too, right? Like that wants to experiment. Because that was one of the things that I was thinking of doing with my communication out to sponsors for next year. I was like, hey, I'm looking for partners that just want to try different mediums, different like lengths of videos. Like, let's try a 5-minute video, an 8-minute video, this title, that title, this kind of edit, or right, like just try different things and see what works, because it's mutually beneficial if we can find the right kind of video that resonates with the Atlassian community, to then just make more marketing material around that. But take some time.
Well, let's experiment. Like, we're happy to experiment with you.
I'll reach out. But again, thank you very much. I know you got to go to another call, so I will give you back a few minutes, and
Thanks, Alex.
I'll just do an outro here before I publish it, and I'll send you a version.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah, great chatting. Good to see you.
Likewise. Bye.